Cinda Gault, and I am thrilled to see you here. We have 5 different groups in our audience, and the first is made up of my loyal soldiers and readers who come out launch after launch and have for a long time supported me in my writing, and I love you to death, and thank you again for coming out today. The second group is made up of newer friends that I've made from speaking engagements that I do to various community groups and book clubs. And specifically, there's a group called Probus that I have received a number of invitations to. And that stands for professional business, and these are people who are retired from professional work or business, and they get together once a month to socialize with each other and invite somebody in to tell them something new about their world. And I've met a lot of very nice people through this group, and I am pleased that some are here today. My third group is a group made up of long-distance friends, and these are people who are going to be watching through live streaming, and they are from far and wide, from Vancouver to Red Deer to Winnipeg to Dryden, Thunder Bay, some in Toronto who couldn't actually make it here, Ottawa, Halifax, Florida, and as far as Tel Aviv. So, hello everybody, thank you for coming. The fourth group might have found its way here from various merchants along Rossesdale who were willing to support my promo efforts by taking postcards, and these included Saddle Studios and Market, which is where my books live generally. She Said Boom, the second-hand bookstore across the street. You'll notice on the novel there are 2 books, D.A. Florence books, on the cover, and they both came from She Said Boom. Also another story bookshop where I had my last 2 launches hosted. Evolve Chiropractic, Cambridge Realty put me in their newsletter, and of course here at the Review Cinema. And then my last group here are my newest friends, and you have come from the Review and Eventbrite websites, and you have given me a healthy respect for technology to be able to get the word out about an event and actually bring people out. So however you got here, I am more than pleased to see you. We're here to celebrate the launch of my newest novel called Everything I Hope For, and it's published by Grey Goose Press. It's my 3rd work of historical fiction, and to be historical, you need to have half of the story, minimum, happen longer than 50 years ago. So that would be before 1975. So I am walking historical, which is a bit depressing, but there you go. My first 2 novels were set earlier in the 19th century, and the first one is called This God-Forsaken Place, and it was set in 1885 with the Riel Rebellion as the backdrop. And the protagonist, Abigail, is 22 years old. She comes over from England after her mother dies and goes to northwestern Ontario to teach with her father, who very soon after that gets consumption and is dying. And she stumbles across a wounded Jesse James gang member and wheels around to protect herself from being shot from behind, and accidentally shoots and kills the Pinkerton cop who was tracking him. So she has a big problem on her hands, and this launches her on her epic journey over to Winnipeg, down through Manitoba, and over to New York, where she joins the Bill Cody Wild West show and ends up meeting the likes of Gabrielle Dumont, who was the right-hand military general of Louis Riel, and Annie Oakley, who was the Wayne Gretzky of her time with a rifle instead of a hockey stick. My second work of historical fiction is called Small Compass, and it was earlier in the 19th century. And it is the interweaving story of 2 women who I consider Canadian legends. The first one is Isabel Gunn, and she started in Stromness in the Orkneys in Scotland, and she cut her hair and disguised herself as a man, got herself hired on to the Hudson's Bay Company ship, and came over here to work as a man in the Canadian fur trade. She worked successfully doing that for 18 months until she was outed on a fur trade hearth in Pembina, which was in Canada then, but is in North Dakota now, by having a baby on a fur trade farm. The second woman is Marie-Anne Gavry, who was from Masquinongé, Quebec, and she fell madly in love with the coureur de bois, and through a variety of circumstances endured a grueling paddle 18 miles into the interior, also to Pembina. So these two women were in the same place at the same time, across a very small river, spitting distance from each other, and they had their babies within a week of each other. And there is no record of them ever having met. So in my novel, I have them meet, and as they say, hijinks ensue. So I learned about these historical worlds through research. I learned the facts retrospectively, and then I breathed life into them using my imagination, imagining what it must have been like to be them at that time going through what they did. In this new novel, Everything I Hope For, it's different. And although the story is fiction, I lived through these times. So there are facts, but facts are fuzzier when you remember them. But the sense of that world has to be pretty vivid to survive at least 50 years. So the short excerpt I'm going to read to you is set in 1972, and this is 4 years after the Divorce Act. So whether you want to call it a shadow or a halo, is still in effect in 1972, because for a number of years after this change, there was a record number of divorces. We're going to meet the Pompey family, and they are swept up in this social change. The protagonist is Belinda Pompey, and she begins the story with a world that she inherits, and it is falling apart. Over the course of the story, we track her life experiments as she takes her own risks, makes her own decisions, suffers her own defeats, and ultimately builds her own happiness. After the reading, we'll watch Harold and Maude, which is a 70s cult classic. I'm sure many of you have seen this movie, some have not. And it is about a doomed relationship that is nevertheless transformative. And therein lies the thematic connection to my novel. So I'm going to read the opening chapter, which is called At 17. Belinda Pompey pushed open the front door to sniff the living room air. Cooler than livable, but thankfully not the bite that came from an empty oil tank in early March. It would take only a few minutes to fire the rooms back up to from their cryogenic sleep. No sign of the dog meant she was hiding downstairs with her tail between her legs, guilty of pooping on the basement floor again. Otherwise, she would be upstairs by now, jumping in circles. Just so long as she didn't try to hide further evidence by peeing on the pile of clothing in front of the washing machine, all would be well for now. Come on, girl, Belinda called. Even in her shamed state, the golden lab couldn't help but wag her tail between her legs as she shimmied through the screen door into the backyard. By the time she barked to come back in, Belinda had cleaned up, leaving no evidence of what to repent. Her brothers' voices echoed down the side of the house before the boys themselves burst through the back door to excited barking, all thundering directly downstairs to play hockey before dinner. That their puck was a hardened dog turd apparently bothered no one. What was once evidence of this behavior had been recuperated into the grail of dueling hockey sticks, and the dog careened back and forth between goaltending and refereeing with equal enthusiasm. Belinda's plan was to wash the dishes piled in the sink and then make spaghetti. That would feed the four of them with some left over to save in the fridge for her father. Not long ago, instead of dishes in the sink, there would have been a roast in the oven, infusing the house with promise. Their home was once not only warm, but beautiful. Her mother sewed matching plaid bedspreads for her brothers, a life-affirming orange quilted one for the master bedroom, and red and white gingham for her. A sophisticated olive carpet ran under the living room teak coffee table and hi-fi stereo, with armchairs upholstered in blue velvet, an artistic choice, facing a black and white patterned couch. 3 steps down took you to a backsplit family room, rimmed with windows and an expansive fireplace. They once kept the back vestibule stacked with logs in the days when her father maintained an ice rink in the yard. While she browned the ground beef, Linda thought back to the afternoon at school, when she knocked at Mrs. McGinnis's door. Belinda had special dispensation to accelerate through grades 11 and 12 English. All she had to do to trigger an English class was make an appointment. Belinda had taken chances with this essay on D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers. Mrs. McGinnis was an odd-looking woman for an English teacher. Her blonde hair, the texture of candy floss, was teased into a French roll. Her eyebrows were plucked back to a thin line drawn on, and her fingernails were filed to points. Now, a guidance counselor teaching English to one special student on independent study, she must have felt out of place as a regular English teacher. I had a chance to read your essay, Mrs. McGinnis said, and I have to say I was curious about all the erasing that seems to have been done on this title page. Was there something else you wanted to add? It wasn't my writing, Belinda said. Oh. I set it out on the kitchen table the night before it was due. The next morning, I noticed my father had written on it. Mrs. McGinnis's voice grew soft, as if she were being careful not to spook an answer. Was there a problem with what he wrote? He wrote, "Are these the Morels or the Pompeys?" Do you know what he meant by that? It was a reaction to the quotations I used. Belinda reached for the essay and turned over the first page. Here, she said, pointing. It's about the mother. Mrs. McGinnis read out loud. There was this deadlock of passion between them, and she was stronger. Belinda flipped over a second page and pointed. Mrs. McGinnis read. She never suffered alone anymore. The children suffered with her. He could have just read it without letting me know, Belinda said, but he wanted me to see. To see what? What was happening to him? To all of us, I guess. Mrs. McGinnis shifted in her chair. What do you think you took from this novel overall? That people can be as noble as they decide to be. You don't think people have inherent limitations? If you can make your own decisions, you can make yourself happy. Mrs. Morel had to go through her husband. Maybe if she could have made her own decisions for her own life, she wouldn't have blamed him so much. Mrs. McGinnis looked at her thoughtfully. Do you think that would have made her feel less disappointed? If you can make your own decisions, then you have no one else to blame. Flipping to the last page of the essay, Mrs. McGinnis read aloud. So in seeking to make him nobler than he could be, she destroyed him. Yes, Belinda said. It was not Mrs. Morel's job to make her husband nobler. Her job was to make her somebody worthy of respect. It was then that Belinda glanced down at the page and saw the checkmark and comment in the margin. You seem to have an understanding of this novel beyond your years. Decided was an A+. All the way home, everything Belinda looked at seemed infused with imminent energy. Leafless trees standing poised to burst into flower. Lifeless grass waiting in wait for the moment it could spring to life and carpet the world. How to describe this excitement coming through her? Bits of sentences floated up to her consciousness, some from stories she'd studied, others embellishments that occurred to her to add. Pulling the table out from its place jammed into the corner of their small kitchen, Belinda set the chairs around it to arrange the placemats and cutlery. The larger dining room table would give them more room, and they used to eat dinner there when things were happier, when they were all home for dinner. Now, there was a sense that darker times should be spent cramped at the kitchen table, where elbows bumped. By the time she heard her mother's car door slam in the driveway, the boys had descended into arguments fueled by hunger. Boys, come for dinner, she called as she opened the door to receive a grocery bag her mom was handing through. Belinda believed that anyone seeing her mother at the wine store could be forgiven for jumping to the conclusion that Megan Pompey was a bored housewife looking to fill the time left by children gone off to school. She was a beautiful woman. At 42, she could pass for 32. She always said her secret was the ability to keep up with the times. All through the 1960s, she'd done leg lifts and sit-ups on her living room floor in the mornings with Jack Delaney on television. Now, in 1972, she was proud to be the mother of teenagers who still saw her as young. She wore blue eyeshadow, like models in all the fashion magazines, emphasizing her already dramatic blue eyes, and drew her eyeliner boldly beyond her eyelids for a lifting effect. She bought clothes for her kids that they would actually wear, neon flower power colors and t-shirts with a graphic of Jimi Hendrix. She took care to make sure their bell-bottom jeans hung almost to the ground, as was the style, even if the material might fray from sometimes dragging on the ground. She herself wore high-heeled boots, a pencil skirt, and a silky blouse, not the sort of clothing a retail sales clerk would have collected over years of pinching pennies. Staying young wasn't just looking young. Being flexible and open to new experience was just as important. She could sing the words to Beatles songs on the radio. It was hard to believe that despite all her efforts and how successful she had been at staying young, Belinda Pompey saw her life as a resolute march of disappointments. No one outside the family would ever guess the venom she nursed. Those inside her household suffered through her bitterness about the hand she'd been dealt. She'd earned the right to play tennis every afternoon, but instead found herself hauling groceries home at the end of each workday. The boys bumped into their chairs with flushed cheeks as Belinda served out the spaghetti on each of their plates, listening to them argue benignly, much like they always had. Her mother sat down and sniffed the air the way she did when she had important news to impart. "Your father and I were at a meeting today," she said. Tyler began to kick the leg under the table. "Stop it, Tyler." "What meeting, Mum?" "We're putting the house up for sale. Your father can't afford to pay for it anymore." "Are we buying another house?" asked Tyler. "Your father's going to find his own apartment. We'll find an apartment for us." "Why isn't he coming with us?" "The house has to sell first." "Why isn't he coming with us?" "You don't need to think about it right now," Megan finally answered him. "It takes a long time to sell a house." "What school will I go to?" "We don't know where we're going to live, Tyler, so we don't know where your school will be." "Where's Dad going to be? Will he still take me to hockey?" "I'm sure he'll take you to hockey. He always seems to find the money to do what he wants." "Mom," Belinda said, "I suppose you're going to make excuses for him. I swear, Belinda, these boys wouldn't even think about their father if it wasn't for you bothering about him all the time." "Mom." "No, don't you mum me. Your father made a promise and he broke it. It's time I get what I want for myself. I'm going away with Isabel this weekend. You can tell your father." The next afternoon, the heat was on in the house when Belinda pushed open the front door. Only after she had deposited her books in her room, let the dog out, and returned to the kitchen to turn on the light, did she see her father sitting in one of the living room chairs. "Dad," she said as she turned on the lamp, "what are you doing in the dark?" He looked up, as though confused to see her. "I got home from work a little while ago. I didn't realize it was getting dark." "What's happening, Dad? Mom said you're putting the house up for sale." "She wanted me to sign over the house. The first 2 lawyers wouldn't do it. Yesterday she found one who would." "Why did you sign?" He took his glasses off and squeezed his eyes. "She wasn't going to stop until she got it. By the way, she's gone away for the weekend with Isabel." He put his glasses back on and looked out the window. "She's been doing that a lot lately," Belinda said. He nodded to the window as though conceding a point. Belinda had been worried about her dad for a while. As the boy who would be rich had aged, he had sunk steadily into a bog of debt, sold his business at the brink of bankruptcy, and in contradistinction to her mother's resentment, felt nothing more than the relief of having broken even. One of her mother's 5 sisters made her husband get Dad a job at the counter of a Liquor Control Board of Ontario outlet, where it was said elephants went to die, and get her mother a job as a clerk in a wine store. Now no one was at home to keep track of their 3 teenage children. These days he wafted around in a world he no longer understood, like the night he and her mother took Belinda to the stage play Hair for her 16th birthday. He wondered aloud in his seat what had happened to real talent. Or the next year, when Megan made him take Belinda to the concert movie Woodstock, that drove him out into the theater's lobby after a few minutes to outwait the rest. All that electric screeching was the sound of a generation that couldn't play more than 3 chords on a guitar. He mourned the melodies of Glenn Miller, Artie Shaw, Ray Anthony, and Woody Herman, real musicians no one had ever heard of anymore. Suddenly an alien on his own planet, he picked his way through the remnants of every decision he'd ever made as the Pompeys became the Morels in a new age. Does Tyler have a game tonight? Belinda asked. Is James going with you? He nodded absently. I'll make you sandwiches. You can eat them on the way. That would be nice, Lynn. Once they left, she'd have one of those delicious evenings with the house all to herself. She could turn up the stereo and dance around the living room to Led Zeppelin until she exhausted herself. Then she'd make tea and settle in on the couch to read a separate piece, her next novel about other people's sadness and problems. It was inspiring to watch human beings find the fortitude to cope. If you're interested in what happens next, Everything I Hope For is available in the lobby, as are my previous 2 novels. And for my live streaming friends, you obviously can't go and pick it up in the lobby, but you can order it by Googling Grey Goose Press or Amazon. Now we'll enjoy watching Harold and Maude together, whether we're remembering the 70s ourselves or learning a bit more about them today. So you can hit it, Max, when we're ready.